Volume 2, Chapter 3 of The Last Man. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christine Blashford, www.sidepodcast.com. The Last Man by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Volume 3, Chapter 2. In the autumn of this year, 2096, the spirit of emigration crept in among the few survivors, who, congregating from various parts of England, met in London. This spirit existed as a breath, a wish, a far-off thought, until communicated to Adrian, who imbibed it with ardour, and instantly engaged himself in plans for its execution. The fear of immediate death vanished with the heats of September. Another winter was before us, and we might elect our mode of passing it to the best advantage. Perhaps in rational philosophy none could be better chosen than this scheme of migration, which would draw us from the immediate scene of our woe, and, leading us through pleasant and picturesque countries, amuse for a time our despair. The idea once broached, all were impatient to put it in execution. We were still at Windsor. Our renewed hopes medicined the anguish we had suffered from the late tragedies. The death of many of our inmates had weaned us from the fond idea, that Windsor Castle was a spot sacred from the plague. But our lease of life was renewed for some months, and even Idris lifted her head, as a lily after a storm, when a last sunbeam tinges its silver cup. Just at this time Adrian came down to us. His eager looks showed us that he was full of some scheme. He hastened to take me aside, and disclosed to me with rapidity his plan of emigration from England. To leave England for ever, to turn from its polluted fields and groves, and, placing the sea between us, to quit it, as a sailor quits the rock on which he has been wrecked, when the saving ship rides by. Such was his plan. To leave the country of our fathers, made holy by their graves. We could not feel, even as a voluntary exile of old, who might for pleasure or convenience forsake his native soil, though thousands of miles might divide him. England was still a part of him, as he of her. He heard of the passing events of the day. He knew that, if he returned and resumed his place in society, the entrance was still open, and it required but the will, to surround himself at once with the associations and habits of boyhood. Not so with us, the remnant. We left none to represent us, none to repeople the desert land, and the name of England died when we left her, in vagabond pursuit of dreadful safety. Yet let us go. England is in her shroud. We may not enchain ourselves to a corpse. Let us go. The world is our country now, and we will choose for our residence its most fertile spot. Shall we, in these desert halls, under this wintry sky, sit with closed eyes and folded hands, expecting death? Let us rather go out to meet it gallantly. Or perhaps, for all this pendulous orb, this fair gem in the sky's diadem, is not surely plague-stricken. Perhaps, in some secluded nook, amidst eternal spring and waving trees and purling streams, we may find life. The world is vast, and England, though her many fields and widespread woods seem interminable, is but a small part of her. At the close of a day's march over high mountains and through snowy valleys, we may come upon health, and, committing our loved ones to its charge, replant the uprooted tree of humanity, and send to late posterity the tale of the ante-pestilential race, the heroes and sages of the lost state of things. Hope beckons and sorrow urges us. The heart beats high with expectation, and this eager desire of change must be an omen of success. O come! Farewell to the dead, farewell to the tombs of those we loved, farewell to giant London and the placid Thames, to river and mountain, or fair district, birthplace of the wise and good, to Windsor Forest and its antique castle, farewell! Themes for story alone are they, we must live elsewhere. Such were in part the arguments of Adrian, uttered with enthusiasm and unanswerable rapidity. Something more was in his heart, to which he dared not give words. He felt that the end of time was come. He knew that one by one we should dwindle into nothingness. It was not advisable to wait this sad consummation in our native country, but travelling would give us that object for each day, that would distract our thoughts from the swift approaching end of things. If we went to Italy, to sacred and eternal Rome, we might with greater patience submit to the decree which had laid her mighty towers low. We might lose our selfish grief in the sublime aspect of its desolation. All this was in the mind of Adrian, but he thought of my children, and, instead of communicating to me these resources of despair, he called up the image of health and life to be found, where we knew not, when we knew not, but if never to be found, for ever and for ever to be sought. He won me over to his party, heart and soul. It devolved on me to disclose our plan to Idris. The images of health and hope which I presented to her made her with a smile consent. With a smile she agreed to leave her country, from which she had never before been absent, and the spot she had inhabited from infancy, the forest and its mighty trees, the woodland paths and green recesses, where she had played in childhood, and had lived so happily through youth. She would leave them without regret, for she hoped to purchase thus the lives of her children. They were her life, dearer than a spot consecrated to love, dearer than all else the earth contained. The boys heard with childish glee of our removal. Clara asked if we were to go to Athens. It is possible, I replied, and her countenance became radiant with pleasure. There she would behold the tomb of her parents, and the territory filled with recollections of her father's glory. In silence, but without respite, she had brooded over these scenes. It was the recollection of them that had turned her infant gaiety to seriousness, and had impressed her with high and restless thoughts. There were many dear friends whom we must not leave behind, humble though they were. There was the spirited and obedient steed which Lord Raymond had given his daughter. There was Alfred's dog, and a pet eagle, whose sight was dimmed through age. But this catalogue of favourites to be taken with us could not be made without grief to think of our heavy losses, and a deep sigh for the many things we must leave behind. The tears rushed into the eyes of Idris, while Alfred and Evelyn brought now a favourite rose tree, now a marble vase beautifully carved, insisting that these must go, and exclaiming on the pity that we could not take the castle and the forest, the deer and the birds, and all accustomed and cherished objects along with us. Fond and foolish ones, I said, we have lost for ever treasures far more precious than these, and we desert them to preserve treasures to which in comparison they are nothing. Let us not for a moment forget our object and our hope, and they will form a resistless mound to stop the overflowing of our regret for trifles. The children were easily distracted, and again returned to their prospect of future amusement. Idris had disappeared. She had gone to hide her weakness. Escaping from the castle, she had descended to the little park, and sought solitude, that she might there indulge her tears. I found her clinging round an old oak, pressing its rough trunk with her roseate lips, as her tears fell plenteously, and her sobs and broken exclamations could not be suppressed. With surpassing grief I beheld this loved one of my heart, thus lost in sorrow. I drew her towards me, and as she felt my kisses on her eyelids, as she felt my arms press her, she revived to the knowledge of what remained to her. "You are very kind not to reproach me," she said. "I weep, and a bitter pang of intolerable sorrow tears my heart. And yet I am happy. Mothers lament their children, wives lose their husbands, while you and my children are left to me. Yes, I am happy, most happy, that I can weep thus for imaginary sorrows, and that the slight loss of my adored country is not dwindled and annihilated in mightier misery. Take me where you will. Where you and my children are, there shall be Windsor, and every country will be England to me. Let these tears flow not for myself, happy and ungrateful as I am, but for the dead world, for our lost country, for all of love and life and joy, now choked in the dusty chambers of death." She spoke quickly, as if to convince herself. She turned her eyes from the trees and forest paths she loved. She hid her face in my bosom, and yes, my masculine firmness dissolved. We wept together consolatory tears, and then calm, nay, almost cheerful, we returned to the castle. The first cold weather of an English October made us hasten our preparations. I persuaded Idris to go up to London, where she might better attend to necessary arrangements. I did not tell her, that to spare her the pang of parting from inanimate objects, now the only things left, I had resolved that we should none of us return to Windsor. For the last time we looked on the wide extent of country visible from the terrace, and saw the last rays of the sun tinge the dark masses of wood variegated by autumnal tints. The uncultivated fields and smokeless cottages lay in shadow below. The Thames wound through the wide plain, and the venerable pile of Eton College stood in dark relief, a prominent object. The cawing of the myriad rooks which inhabited the trees of the little park, as in column or thick wedge they speeded to their nests, disturbed the silence of the evening. Nature was the same, as when she was the kind mother of the human race. Now, childless and forlorn, her fertility was a mockery, her loveliness a mask for deformity. Why should the breeze gently stir the trees? Man felt not its refreshment. Why did dark night adorn herself with stars? Man saw them not. Why are there fruits, or flowers, or streams? Man is not here to enjoy them. Idris stood beside me, her dear hand locked in mine. Her face was radiant with a smile. "The sun is alone," she said, "but we are not. A strange star, my Lionel, ruled our birth. Sadly, and with dismay we may look upon the annihilation of man, but we remain for each other. Did I ever in the wide world seek other than thee? And since in the wide world thou remainest, why should I complain? Thou and nature are still true to me. Beneath the shades of night and through the day, whose garish light displays our solitude, thou wilt still be at my side, and even Windsor will not be regretted." I had chosen night time for our journey to London, that the change and desolation of the country might be the less observable. Our only surviving servant drove us. We passed down the steep hill, and entered the dusky avenue of the Long Walk. At times like these, minute circumstances assumed giant and majestic proportions. The very swinging open of the white gate that admitted us into the forest, arrested my thoughts as matter of interest. It was an everyday act, never to occur again. The setting crescent of the moon glittered through the massy trees to our right, and when we entered the park, we scared a troop of deer that fled bounding away in the forest shades. Our two boys quietly slept. Once before our road turned from the view, I looked back on the castle. Its windows glistened in the moonshine, and its heavy outline lay in a dark mass against the sky. The trees near us waved a solemn dirge to the midnight breeze. Idris leaned back in the carriage, her two hands pressed mine. Her countenance was placid. She seemed to lose the sense of what she now left, in the memory of what she still possessed. My thoughts were sad and solemn, yet not of unmingled pain. The very excess of our misery carried a relief with it, giving sublimity and elevation to sorrow. I felt that I carried with me those I best loved. I was pleased, after